into the service today? My kids were so excited. They've been waiting to ice skate for so many. Like, I get the question all the time. My parents live on a lake and like, can we go? Can we go? I'm like, you got to go ice skate on the cement. It'll be great. For those who don't know me, my name is Justin. I've been here on staff at Kensington 11 or 12 years. It has been a privilege to be here and see so many faces that have been a part of this campus for over a decade. And so this morning I get to share a little bit from this Sermon on the Seats series. And if you were here last week, one of the things that Bill said is God can use our pain as a gift for the world. And I love that thought, because sometimes in our culture the thought is pain is this ending piece, it's finality, it holds us back. But I think the beauty of God is that He can transform us and the pain that we've experienced for new possibilities. And for you and for me, when we consider just this series and the story we're going to hear later, I think you'll see the perspective start to shift about who God is and how He sees you and what our opportunity is. So if you're new to Kensington, one of the things I just want to say about being here is I hope you walk away today inspired or encouraged, that maybe you decide to come back to church because you've been asking a question in your life about finding meaning or purpose or your family. I was talking with a friend of mine who just started coming, and she was sharing the other night when we were at our kids' soccer practice. She said, I don't know the Jesus talk stuff, but when I walk in, I feel something that's different, and my kids are starting to notice it. And so if that's you, if you're at that place, you are so welcome here, because I think it's part of the journey that we are all on. And that's why we tell these sermons from the seats, is because they're revealing about the journeys that we all have, the ups and downs, but what God can do with them. So this week we're going to talk about a story that expands our perspective. Now, I don't know about you, but I believe that the pace of life is fast. Now, maybe that's because I have 4 kids, 10 and under. That could be one of the reasons, but I just think in general, like, you think about TED. Anyone watch TED videos or TED Talks? Like, that is the most brilliant collection of individuals who've done this lifelong research. They are the top of their fields and they get 15 minutes. That's all they get. Right? And because I'm in a hurry, I decide to fast forward it and listen to it at about 1.5 the pace, right? So I give them about 11 minutes of my drive to tell me about all of the knowledge that they have. We're at this pace of life that is so hurried, and I get in trouble with it. I don't know about you, but when I get a phone call from my wife and she goes, "Hey, what time are you going to be home?" Why do you laugh? You've been there. Right? She's like, "What time are you going to be home?" And I say, "About 30-ish minutes." She goes, "Okay, an hour." Okay, great. Like, she knows I'm terrible about it because I try to pack in so many things into what I'm doing. I'm in such a hurry. So one time she was like, "Hey, can you stop at the store and pick something up on the way?" And I was like, "Absolutely." So I'm late leaving the office to get to the store, and I grabbed what she asked me, and I did the thing that I knew would turn around this whole thing. I ran from the door to the car. Like, those 5 steps was going to make up for the last 15 minutes, right? And I get to the car, and I throw the stuff in the side seat, and then I stick my key into the ignition, and then the worst moment happens. It's stuck, right? And you know if your key has gotten stuck. You like start jiggling it a little bit, but you know you can only jiggle it so much before you break it. So you're like, you have your little thing. I have my little thing. If I turn the steering wheel a little bit on this, maybe it'll work. Or if I pump that. Some of you had decided that to get a keyless entry vehicle is a much better option than my story, which I applaud you. But that's not where I'm at. So I'm like doing this. And all of a sudden, because I'm in a hurry and I'm thinking about the future conversation that I'm going to have with my wife, and I'm getting overwhelmed and the sweat is starting to come down my brow, and the things, I'm just playing out every conversation, the anger is just boiling up at me. You know you've been there, right? You can feel it, and you're like, well, I'm in a car so I can yell and nobody can hear me, but I'm angry and all this. And then all of a sudden I take a pause, and something didn't feel right. I look around. I'm not in my vehicle. I was in the wrong car. So apparently there are more silver minivans out there than I realized in a parking lot. And Jack Wilson, a friend of mine who's a counselor, will say this. He said, "Hey, your emotions," I was meeting with him, he says, "Your emotions are real, they're just not always true." Right? But pay attention to what they're saying to you. And I'm realizing the hurry of my life is causing me to get so frustrated that I would get in the wrong vehicle and then get angry at the vehicle. You know what's interesting about that is that there's these thoughts. Thomas Merton, he's a priest and a monk. Stephen Covey, who wrote a lot of books that maybe in leadership you've read. They all have this one thought, and it all has this variation. It says this: we may spend our whole life climbing the ladder of success, only to find when we get to the top that our ladder is leaning against the wrong wall. You know, there's something about that. When I read those words, is that I can get so caught up in my life, the things I'm trying to do, the things I'm trying to accomplish. And then you get to that moment where you accomplish it. You get the job, you get the promotion, you get the girl, you get what you had hoped for, and it doesn't quite satisfy. I was meeting with a friend earlier this week who was sharing with me over coffee about that hurry and that pace led to one of the most difficult moments in their life. And I loved his perspective, though. He said when he took a step back and the pain that he had to walk through, the journey on the other side of peace and joy and freedom was different. And he realizes is in this life, we can get caught up in these moments and miss out on a much bigger perspective, an eternal perspective, instead of a temporary one. So let me pray, and we're going to dive into a perspective that James talks about in the New Testament. Heavenly Father, thank you for today. Thank you for allowing us to be here, to gather, to encourage one another, to walk with each other. Father, would your words speak life to us? Would they speak encouragement to us? Would you remove the distractions that hold us back from experiencing you and your love and your grace? In Jesus' name, amen. So James is the half-brother of Jesus, and he writes in the New Testament the book of James. It's this letter of encouragement. Now, James, think about this. If you were willing to write that your brother and believe that your brother was the Messiah, something significant had to happen. You had to see something. You wouldn't go all in on a story like this unless you saw his life transform, this resurrection, this story. So for some of us, James becomes a really beautiful encouragement of who Jesus is. And he writes this little perspective in the book of James. Now, for me, when I was first starting to follow Jesus and kind of look at the Bible, I read James because it made sense. It was practical. I could understand it. I started looking at some of these words. It was so simple. One of the things he said was this in James 4. Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow, we will go to this city or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, and make money. Why? You don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. The Lord's will. We will live and do this and that. James is calling us to examine our lives. Like, what really matters in our life? What are we living for? What is the legacy that we are leaving behind? Because all of us are leaving a legacy. You know, when I think about the legacy that I leave and what I want to leave, I notice that I can actually figure out the ones I don't want to leave. Maybe you had a tough situation in your home. You're like, I don't know what kind of parent I want to be, but I know I don't want to be an angry parent because that's what I experienced. Or I know I don't want to look like this. I don't want to be like that boss that I had that was very demeaning. So I don't want to leave that legacy. I want to do better. But we kind of search for what better feels like and looks like. And James is asking this question, what is your life? So he's offering us to take a step back and have a new perspective. Perspective, this word has been really powerful for me in this last few months. One of my professors talks about perspective is this. Perspective allows you to see truth and not see it. You must seek good perspective or you will fail to see the truth that you need. He talks about you and I are the leaders of our life. He says perspective is what allows us to see ourselves as leaders. Now, some of us may not feel like we're leaders, but I believe this, that you are the leader of your life. You have the choice of how you love, how you serve, where you put your time, how you encourage people, how you invest in the family that you have. You are the leader of your life. What you do with that choice and that perspective changes your legacy. And James writes this right after he says, what is your life? We are a mist, a vapor. I was thinking about when I've gone to Cedar Point, right? And they have those big mist fans, right? You can tell that they've been turned on because the water just around it the ground just around it is wet. But if you're not standing right under those mist fans, You don't get any of it. You don't feel the sense and that coolness. Because a mist appears and then it's gone. It's just temporary. And the truth is James is kind of elevating our perspective. He's trying to get us to think of the eternal perspective over our temporary, right now moments. Because there's a truth about our lives. Our lives become our legacy. It's the truth I want all of us to kind of wrestle with today. Your life, my life, becomes our legacy. And the question is, what is your life? What are you living for? How is your life becoming the legacy that you hope for or not hope for? And what is God maybe doing in you, stirring in you right now that may shift that perspective so that you can start walking a different future, creating a different future? The power of this line, that our lives become our legacy, is found in perspective. The way in which we view our lives and opportunities that are before us. So I saw this image years ago, and I've never forgotten it when it's come to this idea of perspective. Okay. Okay. So imagine this line, right? If you were to imagine, it goes all the way out that end, so it goes on forever. Imagine this is the timeline of our lives. Okay? This is our timeline. And so often when we think about perspective, in reality, our lives are this, in the perspective of time and eternity. Here it goes on forever. But here's our few years on this world. And when you see this, how often do we find ourselves living for this dot when there's a whole line of existence for us? How often do we find ourselves stressed and worried about a key in a car and letting that ruin our entire day? Like, how long one comment, think about this, one 5-second comment from your boss can cause the impact of this one dot, and we miss the perspective of the entire line. You know, I wonder, like, sometimes, and I get caught into this, right? I'm like, if I just, really, I'm like, here, if this one thing happens right here, then everything will be okay. Have you ever gotten to the thing that you thought would deliver all that satisfaction, all that significance, and it didn't measure up? It didn't quite satisfy in the way that you thought. The thing didn't feel the way, so you start searching for something else, something new. See, I wonder it's because so often we find ourselves living for the dot and not for the line. And my question to you today, when James says, what is your life? He's going, would you consider the impact of the dot compared to the line? Would you consider that maybe your life could be defined by the line instead of by the dot? What would it look like for you to live for the line? What would it look like for you to let your legacy be defined by the line, the eternal, the things that matter, the things that carry on, the stories that are told because of the way that you loved and encouraged somebody, the way that you mentored somebody, the way you walked with somebody, the way you served people? What if your life was defined not by did you get the promotion or did you just get comfortable enough, but is there some impact that is beyond your everyday that lasts? Am I living? This is the question. When I hear the word, what is your life? Am I living for the dot? Or am I living for the line? Are you living for the dot? Or are you living for the line? I got 4 kids. There's a lot of dots that need to happen to make everything work in our house, right? Like, I'm not saying that you'll never have these problems or difficulties, but what if in the midst of those you're able to zoom out and see the perspective of the eternal impact? When I do that, I notice my patience increases, doesn't it? That this moment that I have with a 3-year-old that's ruining my night isn't as significant as the way in which I speak to her, the way in which I bring my patience to that moment. When my boss is difficult, when I'm frustrated that I failed at something, that I'm not defined by that as the only thing, but that my view of eternity is expanded. One of my favorite people in the Bible kind of speaks into this. She models it for us. Her name is Mary. She's also been known as Mary of Bethany. And there's multiple stories about Mary that we can see as she was around Jesus and around one of the followers of Jesus. And her family was loved by Jesus. And we see that in some of these stories. So we're going to look in Luke 10 at one of the first moments that we see Mary and Jesus. As Mary and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha had opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparation that had to be made. She came to him, Jesus, and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, and indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." See, Martha, it says, is distracted by all the preparations, all the things that need to get done, all the activity that has to be accomplished. Martha is so focused on that. Now, it's not bad that she's preparing this meal. It's part of the cultural piece. It's not bad that she's serving. But the anger that she has when she says, "But my sister is not with me," and the way in which she speaks, her perspective is just about herself. Her perspective is about the dot in this one moment of this day. And she's allowing her anger and frustration to be taken out in a different way. This happens, I think, every night at 8 o'clock when we ask our kids to put their toys away. Right? It's like, "Dad, so-and-so they only put 3 away, and I put 6 away." Right? Like, this is all the time. And I laugh because I look at my kids, I'm like, "Oh, that's terrible. It's annoying." But then I realize I do that. Boss, why is it that they don't have to do, but I do? How come they get away with this and I don't? Don't you see what I've done? Don't you see what I do for this family? Like, none of us has ever had that thought in our minds, right? But that's what's in us. We're not far off from this story. See, Martha is distracted by all the preparations needed and misses out on the perspective. And what I love about Jesus, because he does this in our lives, is he doesn't shame her and go, "How did you mess this up, Martha? You are so screwed up." He goes, "No, let me give you a new perspective. You're getting worried about this stuff. Let me point you to something better. What would happen if your eyes saw with new perspective how to live out these moments, these dots in our life?" I believe perspective shapes our priorities. Martha is concerned with doing. The expectation leads to anger, but Mary is focused on being. And I don't know if you've heard this statement before. It's one of my favorites. Is we are not human doings, we are human beings. We are human beings. When we are fully present and being with people, it changes the environment. Just the fact that we do something and we can check the box off of accomplishments doesn't mean that we get to a relationship with Jesus and enjoy that. Like, think about it this way. Some of us have gotten in, like, I've thought about it when I've spent time with Jesus. I'm like, I checked the box. I read a Bible verse today. Now I'm good. Like, I didn't care what I read. I just did it to say I did it. And God's like, no, I want you to be with me. It shapes our priorities. And then the second thing that happens is perspective shapes our posture. Perspective shapes our posture. Mary, while Martha's running around and missing the point, Mary's on her knees at the feet of Jesus, listening to what he has for her, listening to his encouragement, listening to his wisdom. She's in this point of receiving truth and encouragement from Jesus and not missing out on that moment. I used to look at Martha and go, "Man, she's so screwed up." And then I realized I'm her. Right? Like, we can look at these Bible stories and go, "Oh, man, how did they miss out on that?" I'm like, how do I miss out on that? Every day. I'm not any better. But with a different perspective, when you see the eternal perspective, maybe I can lean into his voice a little bit more today. I can experience a little bit more of his encouragement. I can be reminded that I am loved. See, one of the things I believe about us in this perspective is Jesus wants us for all of this. He wants a relationship with us, not just in the moment, but he wants us with him. He wants us to know how loved we are, how encouraged we are. And sometimes our perspective, just focusing on the worries of this little dot, has lost out on the beauty of the eternal perspective. And we miss out on what Jesus is saying to us and speaking to us in the life that he offers. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but again, we have 4 kids, so like after the kids go down to bed, it's a very short window to get a lot done. We got to clean up. We want to have some real conversation without having to cut up somebody's snack or somebody's food. Like this is our everyday, right? So one time, if we're lucky, also other times, but one time we sat down to watch a movie and sacrificed our sleep, right? So I remember sitting down with Jenny to watch a movie, and then it happened. A fly buzz noise happened. You know what I'm talking about? That noise. And for some reason, I don't know what about flies, but they like fly by your face to just let you know that they're there, right? And this moment happened where I'm like, okay, I'm going to focus on the movie. This is our time. We don't have much time. And then zzz, zzz, and then I'm hearing it like pop against the wall. Pop, pop, pop. I'm like, I'm done. I get on my searchlight, and I'm like a lion on the hunt in this house. And I'm looking around, and then the moment you start looking for it, they're like, now I'm just messing with you, right? And they start hiding. And then they fly into another room, you go into that room, and then they fly around. I think this one fly was just messing with me. So I have this searchlight on, and I have no idea what we meant to watch that night because I spent the next 30 minutes realizing 2 things. One, I am a terrible fly swatter. Couldn't hit the thing for the life of me. 2, I needed to order a different fly swatter that had electricity in it so I could take care of it the next time on Amazon. Some of you are like, you should have saved it. No, I should not have. But like, think about that. That little distraction in our whole house can ruin that moment. One comment, one frustrating thing, one difficult moment can ruin a day. One comment between you and your spouse could put a whole damper on a date. So interesting how we get so focused on the dot and miss out on the line. And the legacy, the beautiful legacy that we get to leave, that Jesus is inviting for, that Mary is modeling, is that when we are with him, when we are encouraged by him, we get to leave a legacy that lasts beyond just a moment. In John 12, we see another moment with Mary. So it says 6 days before the Passover. So this is the moment where Jesus is coming to be crucified. Jesus came to Bethany where Lazarus lived, and Lazarus was Jesus's brother, was Mary's brother who had died, and Jesus raised from the dead. And it's this beautiful story. Whom Jesus raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. I wonder why. Martha served while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. And then Mary took a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume, and she poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Notice the different characters in the story. Martha goes from distracted with all the preparations to serving. See, because of that moment, I believe that Jesus spoke into Martha's life. Her perspective changed. She realized what God was saying to her and changed how she lived that out. Her priority and her posture changed. Lazarus goes from death to life. And where's Mary once again? At the feet of Jesus. But this time, she is now symbolically pouring out all of her earthly wealth in this act of worship, this perfume. And it's this beautiful act of worship and this beautiful act of servitude where she's saying, this is yours. Like, I am giving this to you, back to you. See, her extravagant act of worship, every person publicly could see and smell. Everyone was experiencing this moment. So not only does perspective shape our priorities and perspective shape our posture, perspective will shape our practices. The way in which we walk, the way in which we lead, the way in which we serve, it will shape how we live out our lives. When we have this eternal perspective, and then perspective shapes our passions. See, what's interesting about this is there's another person at this table. Like all of Jesus' disciples are there. There's another person at this table, and Judas, one of the disciples, has a comment. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. Mary gave up a year's wage, 1 full year of all of her earnings at the feet of Jesus in this act of worship. Now, he did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As the keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Judas was living for the dot and was missing the line. Judas's perspective is, if that year's wage would have been there, I would have gotten my portion, my little bit of it. It would have been mine. This is the perspective difference between two people at the very same table. And then Jesus, in front of all the others, says something. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. And you will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. Mary, again, is choosing the better thing in this moment. Just like she did when it came to Martha. At this moment, what that perfume was symbolically representing was the preparation for Jesus to go to his death and ultimate resurrection. And in this moment, when Mary does this, she is showing this act of worship of where value is, where her passions lie, what her purpose for her life is. 1 year's wage in a jar, in a bottle. I don't care who you are, that's a lot. That's a lot, that's significant. But it's not just money, right? Think about the sweat equity that goes into a year of earnings. Think about the time, the investment, the decisions, the choices, the sacrifices that you give up in 1 year to earn the wage, and she puts it at his feet and pours it out. She empties and saying, this is, Jesus, you are more valuable than all of this. And what's really beautiful is we get to hear a picture of her legacy later on, the view of her in Matthew 26. It says this, truly I tell you, wherever this gospel, this message of hope is preached throughout the world, what Mary has done will be told in memory of her. Mary lived for the line. She had a view of the line. And that view, that perspective, allowed her to be more open-handed with her life, with her possessions, with her talents, with her gifts. She was a part of the group of women that would be written about in the scriptures that showed honor and value to the person of Jesus. And she does this by giving up what was in her jar. What's in your jar? What is in your jar? What are the things that you fill your life with? Sometimes, what are the distractions that you've been running after? I mean, the easy thing can be money, prestige, significance, approval, respect, accomplishment, security, stuff, time. What are the things that you find yourself defining your life by, distracting you? Because along that, I know this in my life. When for me, the thing that always goes into the jar, the one that's probably the biggest thing in the jar, is approval, validation, honor, respect. Those things I care desperately about and I sacrifice for. And then sometimes I sacrifice things that don't really matter for. And you know what happens what else all goes in the jar? Disappointment, shame, frustrations. Because those are the things that happen as a result of some of the choices where I miss out on it. Where I start living for the dot instead of the line. But here's the question. What is your life? Are you living for the dot or for the line? That's why I go back to Mary. At every one of these instances, the first time she meets Jesus, when Martha's running around distracted, she's at Jesus' feet. When her brother dies, she's at Jesus' feet. In this last moment, this meal, she's at Jesus' feet in an act of worship, saying, wherever you lead me, whatever you want from me, whatever your perspective is for my life, lead me. And she's removing all the distractions. When I think about the jar in my life, I think about people. I think about the people who poured out their jar, their time, their energy, their resources, their passions to be a part of my life. Think about the people who had a perspective that you are worth loving, and you are worth serving, and you are worth encouraging. Like, I think about my buddy Phil. I think about one of my mentors, Brian. I think about all the meals that he offered for me when I was a college student to come over to his house. I think about Clint and Michael and the ways that they encouraged me when I just came on staff here. I think about Steve Andrews, the founder of our church, because I remember this one moment where Steve heard I was going on a trip, a short-term trip overseas. And he goes, hey, send me a letter so that I can help get you there, so that I can help you finance the way to go, because I know you need the money to be able to get there. And he was right. And I remember thinking, like, oh, so Kensington's going to support me? This will be great. And then I get a check from Steve Andrews saying, here's some money so that you can go on this trip. I'm like thinking, here's this jar being poured out and saying, your life is a part of other people's legacy. And I see you, Brian, right there, and I think about Jason, right? And the time, the relationship. I see the different people in this room, and I think about how you, as a response to that, have also done that. Think about Chris, who we saw in video with Alpha. He's investing his every Wednesday night so that people who are asking questions about faith can be encouraged. I think about this because I think when we have this eternal perspective, when we have this idea that there is something worth our lives being given out to be at the feet of Jesus and see where he takes us, we get to be a part of stories and impact for generations. I remember when Hope Water Project started here. I was just talking with Clint about this on the phone. Hope Water Project is part of Kensington, and I remember the service where we were like, hey, what could happen if we invested in clean water in our partnership with POCOT, and we hope that one well would be dug this year. One well that would impact 3,000 to 5,000 people. And then I remember this moment where Brandon said, hey, what if we could do more? What if we could lay our jars out on this table and see what God can do? And in that moment, that weekend went from 1 to, I think, 8 or 9 wells being impacting 45,000 people. Like, we get to be a part of stories of people and legacies of people that we will never meet when we live for the line and not for the dot. So what is God nudging you to do? For me, I always come back to this idea of people. Who is he calling you to encourage? For some of you, who is he asking you to take out to lunch, to send a text? What is that nudge that he's placing on your heart that you get to be a part of encouraging others? And for some of you, maybe it's you going, hey, I could use that in my life. That's why I'm here. That's why I love our community and groups and things like that, because it is this community that says we want to invest in the people around us because people have invested in us. Jim Elliott, one of my favorite missionaries, has this line that's always stuck with me about perspective, about living for the line and not the dot. He said this: he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose. He is no fool who gives up the time, the investment that you can't keep to make an impact on things you can never lose. The eternity, the eternal, the relationships that are available to us. So we're going to see the story of Elizabeth and her perspective. I believe that this story is beautiful, but before we do that, we're going to receive our offering this morning. And I want to say this: whenever you give here at Kensington, my hope is that you know in partnership that we are about the eternal, the impact beyond just these walls, beyond just our community. And so I just say thank you for being a part of that partnership with us. If you're new to Kensington and you came to give, awesome. But our hope is that you just are part of this community. You experience some of the encouragement, and maybe you go out to the hub afterwards and talk to one of our team members about getting connected. You can give online as well. Those I find are the easiest ways for me and our family. But I want to share a little bit of perspective around this Elizabeth story. This is a story of Elizabeth Dalton, and it is actually the inspiration of this entire series. sermon from the seats, and you'll hear a little bit of why, but you're going to hear her story told from the perspective of Jennifer, her longtime best friend. These two have known each other and been in relationship with each other. They've been friends. They were in ministry together. They both had this longing to be married. They longed to have a husband, and they longed to have kids and have this legacy that they could leave, and that wasn't in the cards. So they just decided as two individuals to encourage one another along the journey, and at some point they decided that each of them individually wanted to have children of their own. And so their dream of marriage never happened, but what happened as Elizabeth got pregnant, something happened and everything changed. And you're going to see some of the perspective, in my opinion, of how she was like married. And so Danny told us about the story a while ago. He's our lead pastor at Troy. And he's like, these few moments with her changed everything about how I saw and walked and was in this world. And the reason why is because I believe Elizabeth knew what it meant to be with Christ. To be like Mary and be at his feet and to live for the life. Let's check this out.
Liz was a beautiful mother. She loved it. She loved children. It was her lifelong dream to have a child. She adored Micah. She prayed over him. She loved him. She spent all her time with him, loved making him laugh. Relating to children, Liz just gave her all. Liz and I met at church we were attending. At the time, I was a youth pastor, and she was looking to volunteer and help out with the youth group. She played many different instruments, and she led the worship for the teens at that time. So it was probably, 25 years ago. Somehow 20 years passed, and you realize that she became your best friend. And most of it was due to raising how many youth coming through and relating to them and getting to love them together and being a part of everyone's life, that you became more a part of each other's life. I was engaged, and we ended up breaking off the engagement. So I was heartbroken by that because I wanted to have children. And I talked for probably about 8 years about it. She's like, if I ever get to 40, we're still going to have children. Each of us can adopt our own children, we can help each other out. When she turned 40, we looked at adoption and found out it was outrageous. We talked to one of our friends who was a doctor, and she suggested doing it medically. Looked into it, and that was $3,000, much better economically. So we decided to go ahead, and both of us tried it. Liz was very unsuccessful at first. She dealt with a couple miscarriages and things like that. I, on the other hand, got Josiah. Then she got pregnant. She was due in August 2018. Everything kind of changed when we went for her mid-pregnancy scan. I went along with her and her mother. We were there, and they said, hey, I think we found something. It looks like you might have a cyst on your ovaries. We don't know what it is, but we need to look into it. We found out she had, in fact, had stage 4 stomach cancer. Around 20 weeks, she started to have to do chemo with the baby. It was one of the only chemotherapies safe for her. They had to deliver Micah early. He was born July 2nd, and he was healthy. Liz's cancer progressed, and we had decided to stay home, and that she was going to do hospice in home. We wanted her to be with the boys and be with the family because she was concerned for them. She was concerned for her family. Her first and foremost thought was that everyone knew her heart for them and that everyone was right with God. She started getting sicker and sicker, so it was less time that she could spend because she became very, very weak. But she at least was at home where she could hold her baby and love on Micah. Danny came to visit Liz and I at the house.
I came in, shook hands, met everyone. There was 2 little beautiful babies there. The grandparents were there. And then Jennifer walked me down the hallway to see Elizabeth, which was her best friend. And we went right into the room, same layout as my childhood home as I used to sleep in. Same exact thing. So I sat at the foot of the bed, I introduced myself to Elizabeth. We smiled, we talked, Jennifer sat down, and we just started talking. And we talked about life and Jesus. Elizabeth was in and out of consciousness at that point. So we just kept talking, and sometimes I'd grab her foot and we'd laugh and we'd have these conversations. And then at one point, Jennifer just said, hey, we want to talk about the memorial service that we want to do. And the minute she said that, Elizabeth sat up in bed and she was so animated. Okay, this is what I want. And the service, I've already thought about it. I know everything. And she got so much energy. And at one point, she looks at me and she said, listen, I don't care who does the sermon. I don't know if you're going to do the service or someone else. It doesn't matter. But I've already written my sermon. And this is what I want you to say. And she proceeded to go through her sermon, what she already written and what she wanted people to hear from her. And I didn't have anything to write down, so I'm like, oh Lord, let my memory hold these thoughts.
It was really neat because Liz was very weak. But of course, when we talk about Jesus, she became very clear-minded, very strong. She was able to share her strong faith with him and how much she loved her Lord. And it was like someone who came in that was an old friend.
When I got in my car and started driving, I thought, wow, I was really moved by Elizabeth. I think I cried most of the way home. When you see a young life, she's relatively young, late 30s, early 40s, and you see kids and you see these things, and then you watch someone navigate it so powerfully. I don't know if she knew how powerful she was in her weakest state.
The day of the funeral was really kind of a blur a little bit. Danny did the sermon. He did a beautiful job of sharing it.
I had the honor to say, this is not my message. This is actually the message that I got from Elizabeth, and I'm going to give Elizabeth's message to you today. And then I proceeded to tell the message. What I learned from her sermon was amazing, actually, because both her and her friend Jennifer were in ministry, their whole friendship. And they were in different kinds of ministries, so they connected with all different kinds of churches. And one of the passions of my heart has been unity. And the first thing that Elizabeth said to me is, make sure you tell everyone that we are to be unified in Christ. God calls us to unification in John 17. And it resonated with me because I've been thinking about that so much. And then she proceeded to say 2 things that I thought really changed for me. That our life is a vapor. It's this mist. That's what Scripture says. It's just this moment that is here and goes. Make sure you spend your life on the right things. And then the last part was, what are you pouring your life out for? What are you giving your life for? And she got so passionate at that point, and she said, we have to give our life for Christ. That is the only thing worth our life.
All the time I've known Liz, I've learned so much about Jesus. How to give yourself to him every day and every moment. How to make Jesus a part of everything we do and include him in our thoughts and include him in our lives and include him in our relationships. She was a very peaceful, loving person. She gave everything she had, and she'd be able to get anything done and organize anything. I hear daily how people miss her. She was a school counselor. And I still get Facebook from students that miss her and how they were impacted by how she loved them. More than anything, I want Michael to know that his mother was a woman of God and that her desire was that he grew up to be a man of God. And not at age 20 or 30, but as a child on, that he could be a man of God.
Those kinds of lives and examples are the things that actually have eternal value. Like, that shaped my heart. That shaped my life. I barely know Elizabeth. Still to this day, I hardly know her at all. But I can say that that moment and her faith changed me forever. And I was with her for what? 30 minutes of my life. And I'm different.
I always wanted to be part of the crowd because it was safe, but it's not worth it. It's so much more. It's more fun too. Plus, you get what you want in the end. Hearing God say, "You did what I wanted. You did what I asked."
It's beautiful, isn't it? To see a person understand their purpose, to have an eternal perspective on their lives, and be able to show peace in a way that doesn't make sense. That's the heartbeat. That's the heartbeat of this whole day. Is that we would walk in such a way that we would bring peace into all these situations and relationship, and it would then leave a legacy. And I know some of us, we get concerned of maybe it's too late, or I don't know if I have what it takes. And I heard this one quote that has always inspired me. It's, when is the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago and today. You can't do anything about the last 20 years, but you can do something today. And as I was sitting down at breakfast with a couple friends, one of the guys said this, he goes, my mom, her life has transformed in the last 5 years, to the point where my kids have no idea about the last 20 years. But they have a view today that will change their perspective for all eternity. And you and I are offered that today, to build our life on one who can walk with us and gives us this eternal perspective and tells us to live for the line and not for the dot. So my hope for you is that that's what sits on your mind, that you would walk out in that. And so our band is going to play this last song that's just beautiful and powerful. And in the middle of it, and when you're ready, we cut a bunch of pieces of rope that you can grab that may elevate your perspective of who God is and what He is calling to. So come up and grab one of those and hold on to it. Put it in front of your mirror in the morning as you walk out, or in your car, wherever you want. But as a reminder that His perspective of your life is far greater, and He's offering you far more.